Welcome, everyone, to another CIDDL Office Hour. We are here today with Cheryl. I will turn it right over to her to introduce herself and our topic today, but I just wanted to send a reminder out that we will be posting this video to our CIDDL YouTube. Feel free to watch it back, and if you have any questions, join our community or reach out to us with any of those questions. So Cheryl, take it away.
Great. Well, welcome and thank you for joining today. We're going to talk today about smarter data analytics with AI. I am the evaluator for CIDDL, and so I do a lot of data analysis in this and other projects. And one of my pain points has been open-ended responses. We get such good data about how the programs are going and program evaluation and how we would do improvements, but it's very difficult to analyze that data, as you might imagine. So I originally thought that I would actually address qualitative and quantitative data, and realized relatively quickly that I was overshooting for 15 minutes. So we're going to concentrate on qualitative, although I do have some information for you about the quantitative data and AI. One of the first things I'd like to talk about is just open-ended responses and how valuable they are to higher education and K-12. And I've listed, if you're interested, you can share some of the ways that you use open-ended responses in the chat. But I've just listed some that are typical. Everything from instruction and discussion prompts to formative assessments, so you can kind of check along the way how your students are doing, the summative assessments and essay questions and portfolio reflections. Research has it, program improvement especially. We do a lot of open-ended questions, and then narrative evidence of department improvements and culture shifts and even certification of programs. And so there's real reason why we would want to use open-ended responses, even though I think a lot of us hold back because they're very difficult and they're time consuming really and expensive to analyze. And so I was really intrigued with the LLMs and the natural language process. And what I put up here is just the idea that the textual responses are so valuable. And we're noticing that the emergent research indicates that LLMs, with appropriate prompting and with appropriate guardrails, can really be used effectively to analyze open-ended questions. And I provided for you today three research studies that are peer-reviewed in peer-reviewed journals that I was really intrigued with. And one of the things that all three did is they looked at ways that you can analyze open-ended response or open-ended questions and responses from them. Of course, and there's three kind of major ways. There's the typical way where you have human coders, but that, anybody who's involved with that knows how very specific you have to be with the coders and how you have to train them for inter-rater reliability, and it's very expensive because time is money. Then the second one is machine language analysis. And there are lots of models out there, but they, again, are very expensive to do. And then the third area that's kind of come on the scene is the LLMs. And what these research studies, all three of these studies, these articles actually show, is that when all three are compared and contrasted, especially for thematic approaches, what we find is that LLMs actually are at the same level as human level performance with the inter-rater reliability, which is pretty impressive. They also stack up pretty well with the machine language coding that's been done. So if you're interested at all, there's articles that you might want to take a look at. And I thought what I do today is give you a couple examples and then kind of show you how this is done. The first one is a very simple one. You guys have probably done some of this before, but I thought I would just set the stage with this one. This is actually a small data set that I'm using at Fresno State University. They have an STEM grant from the National Science Foundation where they actually take first-year engineering students, many of whom are actually first generation students, and kind of create this cohort where they support and encourage and also give them money. And so this was one example of a question that we asked last spring. Please describe the most important benefit that you receive as a scholar and why you feel like that's important. And so, whoops, I'm going to go back for a second. Um, and of course, I just want to kind of model how we would do this. One is that prompting is so important, and it's important to give AI the context with which you're actually asking it to analyze your data. So I'm just going to take what I wrote here. It says most are first generation. I put the question in there that we asked, and then I said, please analyze the data, identifying up to 5 key themes and the percentage of scholars sharing that input, and then the 100 word summary. So I'm just going to pop over to AI and ChatGPT in this one, and simply pop that in. And then you could actually copy and paste. There's only 15 responses, so it's easy to do. Or you can actually upload your data into ChatGPT. And I have it in a Word document, and I'm going to do that. And voila. And you can see that it's analyzing the data. One of the things that I did in the evaluation report that I did for Fresno State last spring was to actually take every open-ended question and actually do that kind of analysis, and so that they not only had the raw data, but they could also look at these summaries. And so you can see here, no surprise, it gives me what the key themes were in terms of the benefits that these scholars were asking about. It talks about how the percentage of the scholars who actually mentioned it, et cetera. And they can then ask questions. I would for example, I ask questions about tutoring, et cetera, and I compare and contrast this to what they were really trying to do. So it's really very, very valuable. And they found that when I put this in, I put the themes, I put the word summary, and I put the raw data, they felt it was extremely valuable to them in actually improving their program. So that's a really simple one. Let's go on to one that's a little more complex and use some of the good practices that these researchers are suggesting. One that I'd like to talk with you a little bit about is a large data set that I have from Utah. I'm using this with permission, and I have 7,402 scenarios that teachers wrote about how their students were using AI in the classroom. And so I've got this data set. It's a huge data set. And what I did for today, what I did is I actually filtered the data set. So I was looking for only those scenarios that the teachers said were actually involving AI. They were flagged by the teachers, because that's one of the questions we ask at the same time that we get the scenarios. And so my question that I'm really looking for is very simple. In what ways is AI being used by students to increase and deepen their learning? And how does that vary by grade level? So I also want to point out that it's a very big data set. And so one of the best practices that I'm seeing in the literature is that you don't just upload 1,000 records and expect that it'll do the analysis. That there's a recommendation that you actually upload no more than about 200 records at a time, do your analysis, and then go on to the next 200, and then the next 200, and then consolidate them afterwards. So that's a really important point, and it's something that I really wouldn't have thought about. I would have just said, oh, I'll just do it. The other thing that I'm trying to do is I'm looking at this as an evaluator, and I'm saying, I've got 1,000 records here. I have been using a framework for analysis called the range of uses in K-12 schools that has, are they consuming, are they creating and producing, experiencing, et cetera, et cetera. I want to continue to use that framework, but maybe I should be updating that framework because AI is now on the scene. And so that's one of the questions that I have. The other one is, well, Utah is really interested in ISTE standards. So here are the student ISTE standards. I'm really curious about about how many of these scenarios and which ones really represent what ISTE was trying to get at with there. So my suggestion to you is that there's lots of frameworks out there that you could map to these data, and AI can help you do that. Another one that Utah is using is a portrait of a graduate. These are competencies that they feel like students need before they actually graduate. And so we could do some mapping there. And so what I'd like to do is kind of show you a workflow for approaching larger data sets and what you should need to do and some of the guardrails that you need to put on. So this is kind of a 7-step process. The first one is really just, providing AI with the context and all of the prompts that it needs to understand what you're really after and the guardrails that you want to put on it. Second one is identifying preliminary themes around this data set. One of the things that I was thinking about as I was kind of researching this is saying, why do I need these themes? I'm just going to jump right to my framework, have AI do the analysis based on that framework, and we'll see what the percentages are. And in reading the research, what it suggests is that is a mistake, because what you want is you want a fresh look at all the data that you have, and you may miss some new things that are coming out of that data if you actually put it into kind of a framework that you already have. So it's suggesting that the first thing you should do is preliminary themes. Then once you have those, then do a mapping to your code book or framework, and then cluster and summarize, validate, check for reliability, and then generate narrative. So let me go here, and what I've done is I've actually suggested, I'd actually like to lead you through that process for at least the first few steps. One is that whole idea of purpose, context, role, and output. So I actually put in here, here's what your purpose is. Here's what the role is. You're going to be acting as a research assistant in a statewide evaluation. The context is that we have 7,000 teachers, and here's what the question was. And then once the teachers entered the scenario, they were asked to identify content areas, et cetera, and tech types. And then directions. The data set here has been filtered to include only those scenarios that I showed you earlier. And I talk a little bit about the fact that the spreadsheet I'm uploading has 3 columns in it, and here's what they are. And then I want a rigorous qualitative coding method used to categorize the ways in which students are using AI. Avoid speculation or invented data. Rely only on text provided. One of the reasons I put that in is because when I actually tested this out, I found that AI had a tendency to stop using the original text that teachers put in and just, summarize. And that wasn't really valuable to me. I really wanted to know what the teachers were doing. And then here's the output that I want. So what I did, and I could do this live, but it took about 5 minutes to do the first analysis. So I just want to show you what I actually did this morning, and then we'll go from there. So let me get this out of the way. So here's what I did. I uploaded the data. I actually, instead of using all 1,000 scenarios, I only used 200 of the scenarios, and then I'll go back and do it again and again. I put that the prompts that I just walked you through, I put that in, and then I had it spin, and you can see it took almost 6 minutes to actually do this. And then it gives you the analysis. So it says what you gave me, high school, middle school, and elementary, the coding approach, so you can defend it, And you can see inductive review of the 300 scenarios. AI put a small code book together and talked about keyword assisted coding, and then noticed that there were some that it couldn't actually identify and classify. And then it gave me a high level picture of how students are using AI. And so you can see that these are themes that actually AI came up with based on the data that it was reading. And you can see creation and design using AI-enabled tools. It has a description over here, writing and communicating, brainstorming, drafting, etc. I think even, what it's come up with is actually really quite good and interesting. Research, explaining and summarizing, personalization. And then what I would do if I was actually doing this and have been doing it, I would stop and say, are those the right themes? Are they too broad? And so one of the things that I would do if I was doing this in real time is I would actually say, I don't like the fact that you have writing and communicating in the same theme. I want you to separate that. And and as you do this, it'll do it for you. And the same thing here for personalization, differentiation. Maybe I would separate those. And I don't like, another thing that I would do is say what's missing. Like, I don't see any collaboration here. So let me just ask that question. Oh, and let me show you the rest of what they did. So they did theme by theme detail. So creation, what students are doing based on the scenarios, what's the common pattern, what's the interpretation, et cetera. And I'm not going to go through all of those. I'm just going to scroll down, but you can see that all of the themes, they did that same kind of thing. Then they did a patterning by grade level. And it's interesting, they also did a summary on AI use is dominated by writing and creating products at the elementary level with strong supports. And there's a lot of writing in the elementary one. Middle school is mostly about creation and design. And then high school is more balanced and distributed. And then it gives you a sense of what are the implications that you can lift into your evaluation program and what do you want to do next. And what I might ask some questions here. So for example, I have to get my, sorry, I have to get my pictures of you out of the way here. Okay, so I might say, were there no scenarios that included collaboration, among students? And we'll see what it says about that. So it says that there was some reference, but it wasn't collaborating with or through AI. And so then it gets into more distinctions, what the scenarios did and did not do, and gives you 8 scenarios that mentioned collaboration and made it clear. One of the things that this brings up to me, and I would take back then and did take back to the State Board of Education team, is that kids are doing all this by themselves. Why are they not doing more of this together? Could you not provide some professional development for your teachers to talk about how you can get more discussion going and iteration going among kids, as well as that co-development with AI, etc. The other thing that I might do is actually say, were there any scenarios that were difficult to classify or that you had low confidence? Any and see what it says. And again, one of the things as this is coming up is as an evaluator, you always actually capture the process that you're using so that you know the steps that you went into it, so you know that you can replicate this. So very, very, very important as we go through with that. So let's see what it says in terms of the anomalies. And so it gives me things like scenarios that were too short, scenarios that mentioned AI, but not how AI was being used. Well, and this kind of brings up the idea that there were 29 teachers who actually said they were using AI, but they had misconceptions or incomplete scenarios about how they were using AI. And maybe they don't even understand what AI is. So it suggests that there needs to be some more training about that piece of it. So let me go back to my PowerPoint slides, and I'm over time here, so I apologize. That was prompt 1. Prompt 2 we already did, which is the preliminary themes. And then one of the things that we can do now is actually say, okay, I want you to map to this particular framework. And since we're so low on time, I think I'll just suggest to you that this is the actual prompt that you would use. Classify each scenario under each one of those. And what it will do actually is do a mapping from the code book that it actually developed from my 200 scenarios, or 300 scenarios, to this, to kind of see how that mapping is, and so on. So you can actually get that, and that is a real opportunity as you do that to look at this framework and say, were there some outliers? Were there some things that I just didn't fit in any of these categories? And should I really update my framework to represent the new things that are happening in AI? And then from here, we would do kind of a summarize the nature of the in 2 or 3 sentences and use language appropriate, and then give me some examples and disaggregate by elementary, middle, and high. So you kind of get that sense. I'm moving towards the report. One of the other things that we do, and we've already done a bit of this, is catch hallucinations or misclassifications by asking questions about it. And we actually did that and caught some. Another one is can you actually check reliability? And there's a process for doing that where you reanalyze the same responses using only the final code book, and notice that there were some iterations of the code book along the way. So then we can compare and contrast. The other way that I suggest you take a look at this is, and this is a suggestion of a lot of researchers, is to still have that human-centric approach to it and randomly select 10 to 15% of the responses in hand code. And I always do that when I'm using AI. AI is a great approach, but it's really, it's still not 100% reliable. And so I always make sure that I'm not giving inaccurate information to my clients by actually doing that checking. And then finally, the last prompt is actually just create ready to report outputs, and it'll do table with categories and and descriptors and the percentage in each. It'll disaggregate by level, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of the process. And I think that whole idea of that 7-step process is really important, that you actually throw caution to the wind and ask AI to really do that analysis for you, and then see if there are some things that you really hadn't thought about, and update your framework. Key takeaways, no surprise here, AI is accurate but not infallible. So you need to validate with expert coders that the prompt engineering and the structured code books that you use are really significant and really important. And the reliability goes up when you have a code book that is very, very well defined, and no surprise on that one, right? And then ethical oversight and transparency is really important. So document everything that you're doing. The best practices here, treat it as a co-analyst, not a replacement. And I have a lot of fun with this because I ask questions about, well, what about this? Well, what if I tried this? And AI is just so responsive and such a co-partner in actually doing this. And so it's just a reminder that there really are some good studies out there to show that there is high reliability and accuracy in this analysis. And I am really excited about this because I can actually ask some more open-ended questions that will give me better data. And then finally, the statistical analyses, I haven't really done much with that, but I thought I would share with you 3 studies that I found that really suggest that it's really great for statistical analyses. You have to be careful about the prompting that you do, and go back to prompt engineering and make sure that you follow those steps. And it also suggests that there are some types of statistical analyses that are better done by LLMs than others, and so you really need to take a look at that. And finally, that you need guardrails on it. You need to actually make sure that there's that human eye over and oversight as you do these analysis. And it strikes, I was a high school math teacher for a long time, and one of the things that we always taught was estimation. And that's such a great skill and an important skill these days, to make sure that you're not just trusting this machine to actually do this, but you have a sense in your mind about what's reasonable, and you actually ask questions and think about that. So I guess the presentation part is done. Any Q&A? I didn't leave very many minutes for that. Sorry
It's
about that.
okay. Cheryl, I think it would be really great if you could give us a version of this to share in our blog when we post it, because I think those prompts would be helpful to have access to outside of just the recording. So we can share that with anyone that comes back to view this video and look for resources.
Oh, great. This one is actually, let me go to the top. I'll put this in the chat if anybody's
Great.
interested in it.
Thank
Uh,
you.
yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. And you answered a lot of the questions that I had for you today. One being when AI generated results appear convincing and they could be inaccurate, what are your checks or verification strategies for recommending that you recommend for those checks? And you kind of briefly went over. Is there anything else you'd add to that?
No, just that it's so new. Most of the articles that I read and that I've been reading in this analysis are really 2023 and on, obviously with the LLMs. And so we're all learning, uh,
Yes.
and we all need to contribute back.
Yes, absolutely. So what is your first day? You're just starting to do using AI for data analysts analysis, and you sit down. What's the first step that you would give an educator or a beginning data analyst about AI and data?
Well, consider AI a partner. And I guess the first day, I would actually, and this is what I did, is I actually took data sets that I had analyzed and actually put them into AI and checked to see if I got the same results. I think that's kind of a sense of, does this really work? And is it going to get the same kind of results that I've been getting as I go through this rigorous process?
Great. All right. Do we have any other questions before I stop the recording? Yes, Christine.
Hi, Cheryl. Thank you so much. This was really informative and I enjoyed it immensely. I can't wait to dive into your slides a little bit more. I'm just interested what you think. So thinking about the way teachers look at data right now, how do you think they need to change their mindset and learn about what's happening over the next 5 years or so? And then what like districts and teachers are really going to have to come together when they're thinking about data in a larger version than they are right now. So if I'm in the classroom and I need to go to my administrator and start talking to them about looking at the data myself, what would be my argument to them to say, we need to work and partner in this? And what's the first thing that we really need to start doing?
Well, one is to look at pain points that the teachers have, that one of the ways that they should be using data is very formatively and collecting, data as kids are leaving the classroom, to collect data that way, to do a one question survey and get that information. And if they then know how simple it is to actually analyze that data across 6 classes, I think they'll use data more. The other thing that I suggest, and I've seen this a lot in the projects that I'm doing, is that a lot of teachers and administrators are spending a lot of time looking at data, but oftentimes they don't know what to do with it. And so it's really that human interpretation and the combining of this data analysis with then LLMs that you can actually put a scenario in and say, what should I do about this? And Jamie's been showing a lot of those. And so the combination of this data analysis and then going to that chatbot and saying, I've got XYZ and I've got these students and I've got this sample and I've been using this instructional approach. What alternative should I do based on research?
I
That
think it
makes
would be a great idea too for teachers to have their students collect their own data and analyze it, not only on whatever you happen to be working on, the subject matter, but on themselves, right? And be able to analyze and use the data in AI to be able to act as that coach for them.
And we asked the question in Utah, is your school data informed? And is it a data culture? And that's one of the things that leaders can do to say, we're going to be based on data, whether it's, what we should be serving in the cafeteria or what instructional approach we should be doing for reading in this particular area. It's all got to be data. And if there's that high expectation, it makes a huge difference in how teachers see data, that data are your friends because it can inform your practice and help your students learn. But they have to understand that that it takes a while to get into the data and they need all these tools. They can't just have, oh, this is where your kids are and these are the problems and the gaps they have. They also have to have that second part that says, what do I do about it? And I think we forget that oftentimes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to end the recording now.